Hello, and welcome to the Strange Dominions, where we attempt to unlock the mysteries behind the unseen and unheard, unknown and unknowable. I am your host, Octavian Graves. Hello, patrons! I am so happy to have you all here, and I cannot wait to share this show with you. Tonight, I speak with Rob, who has had a lifetime of experiences. He tells us about a shadow figure in his apartment that seemed to be a helpful spirit, ghost children that knocked about in his other apartment, spirits he ran into on the National Mall, and so much more. If you have seen something strange or unusual, such as a cryptid, spirit, UFO, or anything in between, please email me at strangedominionspodcast@gmail.com. I wanted to run an idea past all my patrons because your opinions are really valuable to me, and I really just enjoy having you guys interact with me about what you guys think. If I started each interview by saying the date, the moon phase of that date, and the planetary day and hour of that date, would that be something enjoyable for you guys, or would it detract from the overall interview? Let me know in the comments or send me a message. Without further ado, I give you my interview with Rob. And tonight we are speaking with Rob. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Octavian?
I'm doing very good. I'm really happy you could come on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I know you had some a plethora of strange encounters.
Yeah, I've been listening to your show. I think I heard about it on Where Did the Road Go? And,
Okay, yeah.
I heard you were in Maryland, so I thought I'd hit you up with some of my weird, fun stories.
Absolutely. I've been looking for more local stories and things like that. So, yeah, wherever you want to start, go right ahead.
Sure. Do you want me to talk a little bit about myself?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
Sure. So I'm one of those people that's probably had kind of experiences with spirits or whatever you want to call them since, I don't know, as long as I can remember, growing up. I think pretty much everybody in my family has also had experiences. So thankfully, growing up, it was pretty normalized in my family, like seeing weird stuff. I lived in a bunch of haunted places, two of which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But this are pretty normalized experiences for me. I don't really talk about it a lot. I think some people aren't really comfortable talking about it, and that's fine with me. I have a couple friends that are into it, but I've been getting into the podcast, especially over the pandemic, and came across your podcast. So I thought maybe I give it a shot since this is my first time really talking about any of these experiences, like on a podcast or anything in that forum.
Well, I'm so glad that you chose me and my podcast to tell your stories for the first time. That means a lot.
Yeah, and I heard, too, you were interested in folks that were, practice magic and stuff like that, and that's something I've done for quite a while, probably since like the mid-90s.
Okay, perfect.
I'm in my early 40s, so I'm not really into some of the stuff that you've talked about on some of your episodes.
That's okay, no one is.
Yeah, I'm more into like kind of the visual stuff, folk stuff, and devotional magic.
Okay, I mean, I definitely do devotional stuff as well, so I'm right up there with you.
Cool. So yeah, I think maybe first I'll talk about an experience I had living in this kind of creepy basement apartment in Dundalk, Maryland. So this was circa 2010 through 2011. So just by way of kind of my life at that point in time, because it kind of fits in with the story, I was kind of a mess. So health-wise, I had like 2 pretty big surgeries. I was dealing with like really bad asthma. I kept getting like respiratory infections, like pneumonia. So I wasn't really like actively practicing magic. I also had a really, really demanding job that didn't really pay all that much. So I was in a pretty rough patch in my life at that time. So the stuff in the apartment didn't really start happening right away, but I think as my health started deteriorating, I noticed more and more activity. So I thought I'd just mention kind of a few standout things, and feel free to ask any questions you want about it.
Of course.
So a few times when I was like really, really sick, like with pneumonia, like fevers and stuff like that, I felt something get into bed with me, like to the point where like I could actually feel, like the mattress like next to me depressing, and like something like scooch over next to me. And that kind of weirded me out a little bit, but it felt almost comforting in a way. I know some people may balk at that, but it was definitely a unique experience for me to have that happen. I used to also see shadow people in this basement apartment. It wasn't a whole lot of light. I think there was only like 2 windows, and they didn't even open. But I would see, kind of what people would call like the peeper. Like you'd see like kind of like a outline of a shadow in the
Right.
corner
Yeah.
somewhere, and then it would kind of peek around or kind of scurry away when you got near it. So yeah, it was not too often, maybe like a couple times a month I would notice it, and it would kind of dart away from me whenever I kind of caught wind of it. And then I think two of the most intense experiences I ever had with these shadows was both times I got woken up by this shadow being, or whatever you want to call it, with red eyes screaming in my face. Both times I was in pretty rough shape when I was convalescing from my surgeries, and one time it screamed "wake up," and the other time it just kind of kept screaming in my face until basically I got out of my bed and turned on the lights. So I didn't really know what that was all about. It didn't feel like completely ominous or threatening. It almost felt like it was warning me, like it wanted me to get up for some reason, but I just couldn't figure out why. Like it was almost like protecting me. I don't know if other folks have ever had that experience. I know.
Yeah, Alex, I don't remember what number it is, but the Boohag episode, he spoke about a shadow person that he felt was more of a protecting energy than any kind of ominous or evil energy. So I think that is can be an aspect to it. It's just not as widely reported.
Yeah, maybe they just get a pretty bad rap in a lot of other folks' experiences. But in this particular case, it felt like it was almost like watching out for me, especially when I was really kind of down and out health-wise. And another thing that really kind of was unusual for me to experience in this place was I was out of town for about a week, and my landlord that lived upstairs, he owned the townhome or the row home. He was also out of town at the same time, and I came back and I noticed like a weird smell. So it lasted for like about a day, and I was like, I got to figure out where this smell is coming from. So I like cleaned my entire apartment, like from top to bottom, like trying to figure out like, did I spill something? Like what was going on? And it was the weirdest thing. I found this dead bird like all the way underneath my bed in the corner of my apartment, with no signs that there had been a bird flying around in my apartment, like nothing to indicate how that bird could have gotten there. And yeah, it was just extremely weird. I don't know if it was an apport or however you pronounce that word, but
yeah, an apport.
Yeah, it was an apport. Yeah, it was really weird, and it was like a gift almost. I don't know. It felt.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I never figured out how it could have gotten in or anything like that.
Just have to ask, were there any cats in the area, or did your landlord have cats?
Nope, nobody had any cats. And like the way the apartment was set up, the stairway that used to be there connecting to the basement had been boarded up.
Okay.
So it would only be myself or the landlord that had a key and would have gone in there. And there wasn't like anything else disturbed. Like nobody had broken into the place. Yeah, I wasn't missing anything.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it was a pretty unique place. But like I was saying, every time I would encounter this spirit or whatever you want to call it, it kind of felt almost animalistic in a way, but like it was there to protect me.
See, that's really interesting, and I want to collect more stories about shadow people that act benevolent and not so aggressive and negative.
Yeah, and my brother stayed with me. I was actually talking with him before, kind of putting together my notes and my thoughts for this episode to meet with you. But he was saying that when he stayed at my place for a few days, he also felt something was there. He said he saw a couple of shadows, but he actually saw a couple of things move in my apartment. Like he said for some reason, and he said in the bathroom, like I had a couple of things laying out, and he saw a couple of things like fall off a shelf, and like where you put your toothbrush in like a cup or whatever,
right,
levitate.
Yeah.
But I never saw anything like that in that place.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. I've always, I always said that I wanted to live in a haunted house or, a haunted area, but I'm sure it's that opinion would change once you're actually living in it.
Yeah, and it's, like I was telling you, like I've had experiences my entire life, and I had like the reason why like I got into magic and all that stuff was because I had a lot of really negative experiences as a kid and tried to kind of learn on my own and try to figure out like what was going on and almost like how to manage it. But with this particular apartment, with the experiences I was having, it didn't feel like I needed to do anything to manage it or to control it. Like I just never really got that threatening vibe from it, like I've gotten in, other cases where I've dealt with like spirits and other type of phenomena.
Okay. Now, you said that you were in a very, a bad way as far as health goes, and that obviously checks like a box for eliminate. How these things seem to occur a lot during liminal periods of people's lives.
Yeah, I was an absolute mess, and it was interesting as you're mentioning like kind of being in that liminal state. It all ended up working out for the best. Like I mentioned I was in like a really crappy job, but I ended up getting like a really great job, making like 4 times the amount of money I was already making, and my health got better. Like I was dealing with sort of this unknown diagnosis, like what was wrong with me.
Okay.
And by the time I moved out, like I got like a full diagnosis by the doctors, and they figured out what was wrong with me.
Okay, well, happy ending.
Yeah, it was a happy ending, and like I said, given all the other weird stuff that was going on.
Yeah. I'm very, I would say that I'm always one of those people that is jealous of people like you who've had experiences your whole life, and it's just become part of the, part of your everyday, because I've had a couple experiences that I've talked about on the show and on Where Did the Road Go, but not that I would call like a lifelong thing.
Yeah, it was so I'll talk about the next one. I'm going to talk about when I was living in D.C. That were kind of like more negative experiences. So you want to talk about those now?
Yeah, just go right ahead into it.
All right, cool. So I was living in Southwest D.C. If anybody's familiar with D.C., that's an area near the wharf. It's an area they just kind of recently, not too long ago, redeveloped. It's about a mile south of the National Mall, kind of close to where the Washington Nationals play. That's a different neighborhood called Navy Yard. So I was living in this kind of like creepy 1960s era apartment building. And, they had redone it and whatnot and made it look nicer. But, I always kind of got like a weird vibe from it. But I lived there for about 3 years and nothing really noteworthy happened at all. But I don't know, maybe other people have talked about this, but something started changing in like 2019. And then, like obviously once I was home a lot more during the pandemic in 2020, like the activity started picking up a lot more. And I would say that, when I started noticing the activity, it kind of piqued my interest. I was kind of practicing some magical stuff at the time, but mainly just for like protection and those kinds of things. But, it just over time got more, it felt more, had more like a negative vibe to it.
Okay.
So just kind of some highlights from it. I noticed like puddles of water around my apartment. And so some of them were like, small, like the size of like a quarter or the size of like a fist, but they would be in like really weird places. So I'd find puddles of water like underneath my bed, like not next to any sources of water.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'd find them like underneath my desk. Like no way it could have gotten there from like a pipe or from me spilling anything. Okay. And they would just show up randomly throughout like my apartment. Like I remember one time, like I dropped a pillow on the floor and I picked it up and there was like water underneath it with no way or how that it could have gotten there. And there was like no leaks in my place, nothing dripping from the roof or anything like that. So that was kind of one of the things that I was like, because I always doubt like all my experiences. I think I'm crazy or, I'm just, making things up in my head. Like it really has to slap me in the face to kind of get my attention.
Right, of course.
So that was kind of the first things I started noticing. And then, being in an apartment, you hear lots of noise, all kinds of stuff. So I usually discount it. But I started noticing like knocking on my windows. So this apartment had floor to ceiling windows and I was on the 6th floor facing a courtyard. So I wasn't by like any trees, but you could clearly hear like somebody knocking on the window. And I was like, that's really strange. And it would be like usually too, like early in the morning, like when there wasn't a lot of activity in the apartment, like there wasn't like no doors opening and closing from neighboring units or people walking upstairs or any other kinds of ambient noise. So yeah, then the window knocking, and then I would say towards the end of like probably like 2020 is when I started to see like these little small gray shadow like beings or blobs, if you want to call them. So they were like 3 foot tall. and I would just see them sort of like out of the corner of my apartment. If I went to walk towards them, and they'd sort of like dart away from me. But what really kind of freaked me out, and what I started feeling kind of the negative vibes was I would notice them next to my bed when I woke up sometimes, like in the middle of the night to like use the restroom or something. Like they would just be right in front of my face.
Yeah, I don't know if I have no idea how I would react to that. I imagine I would not make it to the bathroom.
Yeah, I mean, being in a studio apartment, you don't kind of have a lot of places to go. So, I think for me, I think I used to throw my pillow at them. That was like,
Okay. Did that
wake
work?
up and they'd be in my face, and I throw my pillow at them. I remember doing that a few times.
And that worked? That got them to go away?
Yeah, a couple times, yeah.
Wow, okay.
And yeah, so then the other thing that I started noticing more around the time when I was like going to move out, because I moved out in early 2021, was I would get these transient, like I guess what other people call like those transient like phantom smells, but I was getting like this intense like a rotten smell. Like it would just smell like dumpster filled with like rotten putrid meat, just like sitting in like like hot humid sunshine or something like that. Like it would just be there for like 15 minutes, like really intense, and then just completely disappear, like it wasn't even there at all.
Wow, okay.
So yeah, that was kind of some of the stuff I was dealing with. And for me, like, because like I was telling you, like I've practiced magic before, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll try to get rid of this and burn incense or do some other stuff. But it would work for a little while, but whatever these things, I don't think they were in my apartment. I think they were in a neighboring apartment, or they were just attracted to my apartment in some way.
Okay.
Which I don't know if that makes any sense to.
I definitely think that when you're doing magic in like a public place, like an apartment, and if there is any kind of spirit activity that's just in the building in general, whether it be in one of the common areas or in someone else's apartment, I'm very much of the opinion that they're attracted to that. That something about it, they know that they can communicate to you through that, and that you can if that's a part of your practice, then you can communicate to them through magic. So I don't think it doesn't surprise me too much that you would be getting like spirits from another person's apartment while you were doing magic in yours, or just being a magic practitioner in general.
Yeah, I almost felt like I was like turning on like the welcome, like not like the welcome sign, but like they like I was being noticed or something.
Oh,
that was kind of the vibe I got.
If Timothy Renner of Strange Familiars, he talks a lot about when the Eye of Sauron turns on you, and when this stuff notices you, it comes to hang out.
Yeah, it was not great, and I would say like the phenomena aside, like kind of the vibes I was getting from it were very draining. Like it felt almost. I know some people talk about like parasites as sort of like entities or types of spirits, but it definitely had that kind of vibe to it.
Okay.
And was not anywhere near as like, the other apartment that I lived in that I was mentioning in the basement studio apartment, that the vibes were completely different.
Yeah. Did you get the impression that these things were like ghosts, like they once were living humans, or do you think these were spirits in the sense that they were just non-human intelligence?
So I think for these small 3 gray shadow things, I never got the sense that they came across as like human spirits to me.
Okay.
They could have been play acting, who knows? But I like sometimes I doubt myself. Like I've encountered human spirits, and I was going to talk about some other random stuff that I've experienced in DC, but yeah, these definitely didn't give across like the vibe of like human spirits. Not that I'm like all too familiar working with human spirits. Like I never really got into like necromancy or any of that stuff, but these definitely had like a very different vibe to them.
Okay. Well, what are some of your other experiences?
Sure. So I'm a runner. So I used to go out running in DC like really early, probably sometimes like 4 a.m, and I go running around the National Mall and the streets of DC. So normally I'm avoiding rats and hostile people and cars and other stuff, but I would always randomly see like I would call it classic apparitions. So like these glowing human figure like apparitions, I've told other people they almost look like something out of central casting from Scooby-Doo. Like they look like people in kind of a vague, distorted way, but they're kind of glowing white and gray.
Yeah.
And it would be random. They'd be like at a bus stop or just kind of standing on a corner somewhere, like holding like groceries or something, or just kind of waiting around, just kind of doing their thing. So, I would see them, I don't know, like every few months or so, like just kind of doing their thing. Like, but I would say like, running around the National Mall, especially during the pandemic when you didn't have all the tourists and there weren't a lot of people around, especially that early in the morning, I used to see a lot of like shadows. They were like these wispy black shadow, sometimes humanoid figure shaped things that would be sort of, I don't know, walking around or floating around is the right way to call it.
And these were just out in public or?
Yeah, just like I'd be running and it would look like, I would think that there was somebody like walking in front of me and I'd get there and there'd be nothing. And it looked like, like this thing darted behind a tree or something.
Okay.
Like I remember the funniest thing that I actually ended up telling one of my friends, but I was jogging around the Washington Monument and I literally bumped into one of these shadow things and we both like jumped back startled and then it just disappeared.
Wow.
It was really, it was, yeah, it was pretty jarring, but I don't know. I kind of laughed at it afterwards, but yeah, I would just see these things just kind of walking around doing their thing. And I don't know what they were up to, what they were, but they never really, bothered me or interacted with me.
Did you, it was only like on the mall or like in the public area of DC that you saw them? It wasn't like, did this follow you anywhere else?
No, I would just see them like, it would usually have to be like a pretty like dead time of day, like sometimes dawn,
right? Yeah,
sometimes
that makes
dark
sense.
out. But yeah, no, I wouldn't see them in my apartment. I never saw them like really anywhere else. They just seemed to be like kind of always congregated around the National Mall or on the DC streets of where I was running and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see some of that stuff. And then I was gonna tell you too. I think I put this in my email too, but for folks, so I used to see probably the most active area when I would be running on the National Mall that I would notice some of this stuff was over by the National Gallery of Art.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and so I was kind of curious, like, oh, why does it seem like there's more stuff here than not? Not that I'm like a big history buff or anything, but I figured out that used to be the spot of an old train station. Like before they built Union Station, there was like a Pennsylvania station there.
Okay.
I think they tore it down in the early 1900s. And I think President Garfield got shot and assassinated there.
Okay,
but yeah,
I did not know that.
But it was like a very busy area, I guess, with folks back in the day taking the train. But I don't know, maybe it was residual that I was picking up on.
Yeah, but it's very interesting that it like that you would bump into you and it was surprised. Were you ever managed to like communicate with it in any way, or was it just these like one-off chance encounters?
No, I never got any kind of communication from it at all. It just felt like it was almost like on autoplay. Maybe that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, like a loop.
Yeah, that's kind of what it felt like.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so folks, National Gallery of Art. Then there's some weird stuff over there.
Yeah,
outside.
I'll have to check that out because I've been to the National Gallery of Art many times. I got to see if maybe I can pick up on some stuff now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of. I mean, there's so many tourists, so many people, lots of history. Who knows what kind of.
Oh yeah, I mean DC is full of. I mean, it's it's very much a landmark as far as history goes. Yeah,
it's very pretty active, and it's interesting too. Like I was saying, like I lived in this DC apartment with activity, and then I lived in that other basement apartment. But I lived in an apartment in between both of those that had basically nothing there. It felt almost sterile in a way.
Okay, I've been in places like that.
Yeah, and even though that was an older building, and I remember too, I was thinking back to some people talk about going into like really really older buildings. So I used to live in college in it was an apartment in a house that was converted into apartments, but it was from the 1800s, so it still had like the spigots in the wall from gas lighting. and that apartment had absolutely nothing in it. It was like probably the most sterile place I've ever been in, and didn't feel anything there or have any experiences there. So it's
sometimes it's just like that. Sometimes just the age doesn't always indicate activity. You can have a 500-year-old house, and if nothing happened, then you're likely is there's not going to be much going on in the paranormal either.
Yeah, I never really had a whole lot of activity. I never could really correlate it with the age of a building or anything like that for me. Like even that basement studio place I was talking about earlier with those shadow things and the bird underneath the bed. That place, I think, I looked it up, it was built in the 1920s. I even asked my landlord if he ever felt anything there, if anything weird happened in that place, and he said, no, nothing ever happened there.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, it's very fascinating that this stuff happens even when there's no cause to it, and that's why I kind of asked you about if you thought it was like a human spirit or if it was just a non-human intelligence, incorporeal kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, like I don't know, maybe other folks can relate to this, and maybe you two can, Octavian. But I feel like the more magic I've done, like protection-wise, has kind of kept a lot of the human stuff away from me.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that.
I think when I was younger, I think that was some of the stuff that was really bothering me when I was a kid, especially when I lived in a haunted house when I was a little kid. Like that, those kinds of things were messing with me. But I think more and more as I kind of developed my practice and learned more techniques and whatnot, I think I filtered a lot of that stuff out some way.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if you feel comfortable if you want to talk about your magic or how you would describe it.
It's like kind of a hodgepodge of just things I picked up over the years. I would describe myself more as like a light user.
Okay.
Like I said, I've mainly done like kind of devotional stuff, folk stuff, like call it like witchcraft or whatever you want to call it, and then like visual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for me, like it's something that I've just experimented with over the years just to kind of get comfortable with it, but also seeing what works and doesn't work for me.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's how most people go through it is they see what works and don't work. I mean, I have a number of books that I don't agree with everything that's in them, but the things that I do agree with, I try and use and implement in my own practice. So, yeah, that's a very common thing.
Yeah, especially for the protection stuff. I think that's always been something I've been focused on, especially given some of the activity that I've been experiencing, like keeping it out of my apartment or managing it to the point where it's, not just disrupting my life or, especially like those times I was mentioning when I was really, really sick. Like I don't usually do magic just to not attract that stuff to me.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I feel like you were saying earlier, you kind of turn on the beacon in a way, and that kind of activity can kind of be attracted to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, no, it's just kind of basic stuff. I mean, for me, like it all started like when I was a kid reading those Time Life with the Mysteries of the Unknown series.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever hear about those books?
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents, got all those books for us as kids, and they, didn't care what we read, and like watching like Unsolved Mysteries and stuff, and like they didn't mind us watching all that as kids, which is pretty cool. But and then just kind of getting more into some of the witchcraft type practices, charms, amulets, kind of basic spell work, which for me, like I've been able to get stuff to work by doing just pretty basic type things. Like I was mentioning, like visual magic, it's the same thing. Like sometimes I don't have to do anything at all to try to get something to work.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I was kind of doubtful when I started playing around with it and trying it, but I've had some results. It doesn't always work, but I think I do have some successes.
Yeah, and I think that's that's one of the fun parts for me is when you do something and you think like, oh, that'll never work, like that didn't do anything, and then all of a sudden you got what you wanted or you got what you asked for, or and it really blows your mind. I really enjoyed that aspect.
Yeah. So I'm curious too, like, have you experimented with, do you mind me asking you questions? I'm curious.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Because I know you're like doing like the ceremonial stuff, which to me
I'm
always
training
seemed like
in the ceremonial
really
stuff. It's taken me, I'm one of those kind of people that I really want to have as much information as I possibly can before I even really start the actual practice of it. Also, I don't really have a place to practice. So what I've been doing is, while I've been waiting for the ability to do so, I've been doing my devotional rites to Hecate. I recently started taking the Jason Miller's Saint Cyprian course, which is very interesting. I haven't delved too deep into that. It's pretty basic spell work and meditation stuff so far, but yeah, that's basically what I've done. The ceremonial stuff I'm very interested in, and I do plan to practice it and begin somewhat soon. And I have a lot of experiments that I want to try with that. But you made a really good point about how if you're being bothered by something paranormal, supernatural, and you don't consider yourself a magic user, or you're not really interested in magic, but you really don't want this stuff around you, that's kind of there's a whole aspect of magic that's just on safety and reversal and protection and keeping this stuff away from you. And so I would like to see a lot more of that implemented by people who are experiencing this weird stuff.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a hygiene practice. That's how I kind of view it.
Yeah,
I think
and I've heard a lot of people
talk
talk about it like that.
Yeah, it's I have no idea why I've had these experiences and why like pretty much everybody in my family has too. Like it's weird. Like I could recall many times like us going out to like a restaurant and all of us just sitting there kind of looking around and looking back at each other saying like, yeah, it's kind of a weird vibe in here.
Well, I mean, at least you have that family experience that, that's probably why it was so normalized for you.
Yeah, and even I have a brother that's also dealt with a lot of stuff, and for him it's been a bit more intense and negative at times.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he's kind of figured out his own way of sort of managing it.
Well, that's good. It's
a bit
always
more
good
on the religious side, though.
Yeah, and that's a route that people take and absolutely can take, and I think that it definitely works. And if it works, it works, and so you got to find your own peace and solace with this stuff.
Yeah, I think too, as joking, like maybe I experience all this weird stuff without even trying or without even wanting it in some cases. But some people can eat like fast food every day and still have a six-pack. So I guess you could judge on which is the more useful thing to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't know. It's it's interesting to hear about your story. I think that's what when I was listening to more of your episodes, I really enjoyed kind of hearing you talking about, kind of getting more learned up on everything and kind of exploring it. It's interesting to hear your journey into learning about magic and getting into all of this stuff.
Well, yeah. And, before we got on, I was thinking about if there's one thing that I want this show to do, if there's one service that I can provide, I want to be the guy that every armchair magician looks up to and thinks like, oh, well, when he started he wasn't doing anything, and a year later he's doing stuff. Maybe I'm happy to be the symbol of someone going from 0 to 100 at their own pace, and actually getting into it and going from just reading about it to actually doing it.
Yeah, that's really cool though. And like you were saying too, the intersection between almost like a project that you have to use, learn magic, but then use it as a way to understand kind of more phenomena that's out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of like a instead of doing it for something that someone would consider like mundane things, like for money or love, you're doing it to kind of get into more of the weird and figure out other things that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, from everything I've read and everything all the research I've been doing into this whole topic, especially the comparative aspect of the paranormal and magic, it really feels like magic is the language of the paranormal. And I think if we start using it for that, we would maybe not understand what the paranormal is, because I know a lot of people who've been practicing magic for years and years and years, and they don't understand they don't know what magic is. Like they don't know the mechanisms that make it all work. But I definitely think that this is the last thread to pull when it comes to investigating this weird stuff.
Yeah, like I don't even like for me, I have a background in science, and for me, like trying to understand like the why of it or even the how of it, like I just kind of let it be. Like it
Right.
works and it
Yeah.
works. Like I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit of a pessimist when it comes to
No, I think
the limits of our knowledge.
I
But
definitely understand that, and I would say that, in my opinion, you can't think too much about the why, because I just don't know how much we're capable of understanding when it comes to that. Like, I think that there are certain aspects of it that just are out of our reach, and we just have to be happy with what we have and what we do understand.
yeah, it's weird too. It's like I don't know if you've talked to people or you said you have only had a few experiences, but the few times that I've really gotten like clear communication, like direct contact with these spirits or whatever you want to call them, some of the stuff they say is just completely just nonsense.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
it's
I've
just,
heard a lot of people say that, especially magicians, that sometimes they just you have no clue what they're saying. You can't make any sense of it.
yeah, they're just essentially babbling sometimes, and like I mean, I remember a few times when I've had some pretty intimate direct interaction, like it's kind of balked at any questions that I had, like I'm not going to answer that, or like I don't care what you have questions about. It's kind of
Yeah.
treated me like like a dog asking a human a question, like I don't care what you have to say.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely think that their understanding is so different from ours, and their ability to understand what we are and what we want and what we're trying to get from them, it doesn't compute.
Yeah. That's kind of like that non-human agency type experience that I've had where it feels almost animalistic, or it just feels kind of almost like a massive being, like you said, like it just doesn't understand us and we don't really understand it. And it's kind of existing in our space somehow for a
Yeah.
little while, and then it's just gone.
Yeah. Absolutely. Did you have any more experiences where you're living now or after you moved out of the apartment in DC?
No, so I'm in a new apartment, and it's been pretty. Nothing followed me, thankfully. Knock on wood. Yeah, no, it was completely. This new place feels also pretty sterile. Um, and it's interesting too. Like when I go jogging around where I live now in Maryland, I don't see any of those weird shadow things. So the only thing I see are actual like deer and like
Right.
other like
Yeah.
animals running around.
Yeah, of course.
That's about it. So yeah, I'm thankful that whatever was in that apartment stayed there.
Yeah, I can imagine. Especially, waking up the way you did, that, yeah, I think I would feel the same way.
Yeah, a few times too. I had like that sleep paralysis. I've always had that throughout my entire life, but that wasn't really fun to have. I noticed an uptick in that as well when these beings were around my apartment.
Yeah, I mean, that's very common. I was going to ask you, I mean, you kind of answered it when you said that the thing in the basement apartment, was screaming at you to wake up and you were able to get out of bed.
Yeah, it was and it was weird too because like I got out of bed and then it was still like floating above my bed, like this shadow like mass with like kind of a faint humanoid type outline.
Okay.
And then like immediately got up, turned on the light, and then it kind of faded away.
That's fascinating. I would, there's a, do you, I would love to check out that apartment and see, what the vibe is, and if anything, if I could pick up on anything while I was there, because I'm so devoid of those kind of things, and there's just a very dumb curiosity that really, in me, that really wants to, experience that at least once, just so I can really get into that mindset and see what it's like. But yeah, I mean, that's a really intense story, and I'm glad that you were able to find something good in it. I'm glad that it had a happy ending, because a lot of them don't, and a lot of them they terrify people to the point where they can't live their lives. So I'm really glad that you weren't one of those kind of people.
Yeah, and I think for me too, not to go off on a rant or anything, but I think some of the mass media stuff out there, especially like paranormal TV, like it's a pretty biased view of the phenomena. Like it
Definitely is.
And I don't know, like you could take what I experienced in that basement and turn it into like a haunting episode or whatever, paranormal
My
show they have on
Paranormal
Travel
Survivor,
Channel or
yeah.
something. Yeah. Paranormal Survivor, and say like, oh, it was draining me and making me sick. But it's just, I don't know. I think these whatever they are, spirits or whatever you want to call them, they just have their nature in a way, and they present themselves to us in a certain way. And, you just have to really have discernment about, like, is this threatening you? Is it doing something to harm you? Like,
very well said. I couldn't say that better myself. I absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah. And also trusting sort of like your environment to like compare it to the DC place that I was living in, where I could feel that it was trying to poke around my edges and find weak points. And, when it was kind of getting around my bed and, being there when I was waking up, it definitely felt like it was sort of trying to invade my space, probably maybe trying to break down whatever kind of protection things I put up.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that definitely does happen. There are spirits that, while I hesitate to call them evil, I definitely think they are against us in their very nature.
Yeah, I know like I was telling you, like my brother's had experiences. I think for him, some of the more negative experiences he had, he's always felt like it's been sort of the nature of these things kind of have like just by their very, being around you can have sort of like cause depression or self-destructive behavior. So for him, he suffered, with bad drug addictions and alcoholism. So he always talked about like how when he was sort of in his lowest points that he would see these, really dark kind of beings around him, spirits around him. And, he said encountering them and being around them, like they just kind of relished in his self-destruction, and they were just attracted to that in some way, and they fed off of it, or that was sort of something that they helped precipitate in people or encourage in people, I don't know, in some way, shape, or form.
That's always interested me. I've always wondered, what is it about our bad behavior and our issues that could feed them or somehow stimulate them in some way. I've always wondered what the mechanism behind that was.
Yeah, he always used to talk about how, I don't like to use the demon word, but like he would say that that's what they felt like, but who knows what they were, but they definitely weren't a positive impact on him. They weren't healing. For him, he felt like they were making the situation worse.
I think in your email, did you mention that your father went into the apartment and never came, like left and never wanted to come back, or was that your brother?
No, my brother was fine in that apartment. So in the basement apartment, when I was recovering from one of my surgeries, my dad came out, and he hated that apartment. He hated being there. He just couldn't stand being there. He suffered with alcoholism, and he was drinking and just kept getting like really upset with me for no reason, acting irrational. And you could, obviously for me, I could just blame it on the alcohol. And I was probably a little bit dazed out on like, Percocet or something at that point, but he just couldn't stand being there. He just hated every minute of it, had to tell me like every half hour, like he just wanted to leave. And I felt like whatever was in that apartment didn't want him there. And I felt like it almost kicked him out. Like that it just, didn't really want that type of energy there. And it maybe knew that I was like healing and needed to just kind of be by myself or something. But yeah, no, my dad couldn't stand that place and couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's so interesting how this thing really, it seemed to show you a lot of kindness in multiple ways. That's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, but kind of play acted like shadow people, quote unquote demons from like a horror movie.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was just how it thought to get your attention, so that way you knew it was there and then it could actually help you more. But, there's no way to know what the cause of its manifestation was, I guess.
Yeah, and even like when I was telling you, when I felt it like get into bed with me, like it wasn't like a cold feeling. It almost felt like a warm, like comforting feeling.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's fascinating. I don't know, like, I mean, it's a good thing that you weren't afraid, because I don't know how I would react. I mean, that's never happened to me. I think a lot of people would not be able to handle that.
Yeah, but trust me, I'm a scaredy cat just like everybody else. But I think because of just maybe being a little bit more tuned into it and feeling that it wasn't as threatening as some of the other stuff I experienced. So, but yeah, I mean, compared to other experiences, or even like being in scary areas of Baltimore or DC, or like around those kinds of things, that just kind of just take a deep breath and say, all right, well, what am I going to do right now? And then center yourself and try to not lose it.
Right. Yeah, of course. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was, and I guess you kind of answered it, but when you go to, like, I don't know if you go hiking or go into the woods or anything like that, can you just see spirits, of spirits of the land or spirits of the forest, or is it more so when you're in like civilization, like buildings? Because I just noticed that all the stories are from like towns or cities or apartments.
Yeah, I've gone hiking, national parks, travel around. I like being outdoors. I've never really had any weird experiences at all.
That's
Nothing
fascinating.
negative, no weird vibes, no wood knocks, nothing. No, I've just never felt threatened or seen any spirits or anything like that.
That's interesting because a lot of people, when they have like paranormal and like spirit activity or spirit contact, they seem to have some weird stuff when they are out in nature as well. In fact, it seems to be a massive conduit for a lot of that stuff. So, but that's a very interesting point that doesn't happen to you. That your experiences are somewhat limited to like civilization.
Yeah, I would say primarily, and like if anything, I've always really enjoyed being outdoors and hiking and recreating. But yeah, no, maybe I just haven't gone to the right places or been with the right people. I think I don't know, my 2 cents about some of that stuff. I think it sizes you up when you're out there in the woods, and it kind of tries to figure you out, and just like another animal would or another creature in the forest or something. But maybe I'm just not considered a threat, or it doesn't view me in a negative way or something. Who knows?
That could definitely be it.
Yeah, and also I haven't like actively gone looking for it. That
Okay.
could be part of it.
Yeah. Well, it seems like when you go actively looking for it, it doesn't show up. But when you're just going out there, not even having it in mind, that's when people experience a lot.
Yeah, like I've been to like Gettysburg and toured like the historic sites and stuff like that too, and I don't even think I saw anything at Gettysburg. I think it was.
See, that's rare. I mean, like there are people who don't see spirits their entire lives. When they go to Gettysburg, they're bombarded with them.
On the other hand, I stayed at a haunted B&B, and my friend asked me like, "Oh, are we going to see spirits?" And I was like, "Oh, I know this folk thing I could do to see like if you really want me to." And she's like, "Yeah, why don't we try?" And I did that, and then she said, "You'll never do that ever again," because she didn't sleep that night.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but yeah, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely stuff in some of those buildings there, but walking around the battlefield, it felt a little creepy just knowing like what happened there. But
Oh, yeah,
I
of course. There's a
never saw
heavy
it.
feeling there just in general.
Yeah.
Well, that's really fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed these stories, and I enjoyed talking to you a lot.
Yeah, hopefully I wasn't rambling too much. Like I
No,
said,
not at all.
apologies to everybody. My first time talking about a lot of this stuff,
No,
and
you did
also
great.
doing
Don't
a
worry.
podcast. So
Yeah, of course. Well, you did great, and I'm really glad you came on. So if that's it, thank you so much, and you have a great night.
yeah, you too, Octavian. It was really good to meet you. Have a
Really
good
good
rest of your
meeting you
night.
too. You too.
All right, bye.
All right, bye. And that was my interview with Rob. I loved having him on the show, and his stories are absolutely fascinating to hear. Thank you again to all my patrons for supporting the show and sharing their opinions with me, because we could not do this show without you. Until next time, I will see you again on The Strange Dominions.